the question, Victoria is not going to be here, right?
Well, she will. She's
She
not.
will.
She said she would join about 9:30 or so.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great.
So that's actually a good segue into the order that we would like to do things in. Rick, do you have any sense of how long your presentation might take or discussion or?
Well, yeah, I've got so many versions of it that I can
Yeah.
do a short one, like an outline, and just sort of go off Q&A, or if people are feeling like sitting back, I can read one that's not that long. I haven't read it yet, but it's kind of an introduction that I would give at town meeting. I'd welcome the feedback on it, but maybe reading it and, I don't know. I mean, I could send it if people were interested too. And there's so many aspects of this that could be spoken about, but this would give it. So what do you think? Read it or just give a quick outline, which would
I think we probably have time to do a lengthy discussion, but just in terms of, well, I don't know exactly when Victoria is going to come in. Perhaps maybe we could start with Brinley's on the
Sure.
Quorum, which Brinley, maybe you can explain. Martin was saying that the subject of this has kind of been wrapped into, is it zoning and bylaws or?
Charter and bylaw.
Charter and bylaws.
Sure. I can keep mine really sweet and really short. And leave it mostly for questions. I don't know if you're able to share your screen or not. And if you have the town meeting, the finance committee town meeting recommendation book pulled up.
Yeah,
but
I don't have it pulled up yet, but I can find it unless Martin wants to.
You could probably do it backwards.
No, I get the recommendation book. Let's see. So what page would that be on?
So if once you're in the book, if you want to go to page 184. And I will start while you're finding it. So actually you might want to go to 183, I guess is the big one, and then is the first one, and then you can scroll from that. But so I'm guessing we're all familiar with the CBRC, the Charter Bylaw and Review Committee that is appointed by the town moderator. It's in our bylaws every 5 years. They go through and look at stuff and make recommendations. We've been hearing recommendations from them for a couple of years now. As they've done this current version of going through for the timing. And in fall of 2023, it was called Amendment C. And that amendment was to change how town meeting quorum is figured out. The little brief history of it was that town meeting quorum would be floating. And so every single night of town meeting, quorum would be determined by however many seats were filled of the 180, not people in the room, but actually elected seats. Half of those seats plus one is how quorum would be figured out, hence making it floating, meaning it wouldn't be the same for the entire town meeting, and it wouldn't be the same from town meeting to town meeting, because it would depend on however many seats were elected of the 180 seats that we have available. As everybody here knows, I had a problem with that and have been working pretty consistently to try to get that changed. So I went to several of the meetings of the CBRC this summer, and especially to the one where they were creating warrant articles. And they brought up creating a warrant article, which was also done in the spring of 2024. But the warrant article is allowing for charter changes specifically to see what action the town will take consistent with the scope of town meeting regarding quorum and town meeting size. In the spring, they did one, nothing happened. I asked them to do it again. They were all talking about wanting to do it again, and they put forth Article 29. I had created some motions to go with that regarding the size of town quorum. And because I don't have access to the CBRC special counsel or to town council, I was unable to get sufficient help for me to know that our town moderator would honor either of my motions to go with this article that the CBRC filed. So I created my own article, which became Article 30, Citizens Petition. So in continuing to pay attention to CBRC meetings, they I had it wrong. I came the next night and missed the first night that they did this, but they actually created their own petition, their own motion to eliminate Amendment C, which was the quorum one. Their reasonings, as you can see, if you scroll up, their reasonings were based predominantly around.
Where do I want to go, Brinley?
So probably now the bottom of 184 and the top of 185.
Okay.
This gives their reasoning for it. Basically, their reasoning is that it would be logistically troubling and problematic to have a floating quorum because of recent light of how the town clerk's office functioned and how they will function going forward, that it could be cause problems in the votes and in certifying how many town meeting members we actually have elected for each Tuesday and Thursday of town meeting throughout town meeting, that it was going to be a lot of work, too much work, and could cause potential problems moving forward, meaning we could think that we only had this many people elected, but actually someone else had been certified. And so it was this many people, and that it could cause problems with votes moving forward. And how it was collected, and they think that it was too problematic and therefore should go back to being 180, half of 180 plus one, which is the total seats. I supported this when they did it through FinCom. FinCom supported it. They have they all agreed, it was unanimous support for those in attendance that night to repeal it. And or to rescind it, I believe is you can look at exactly what their motion is. It's for motion A, which is a little bit up, to rescind the adoption of Amendment C. So my understanding is the reason it was decided to do that is because we still don't have full support submitted minutes from all of that town meeting session that had all of this. So none of this has been submitted to the legislature yet. So it's still just kind of sitting in limbo. We've voted, but nothing's been submitted or finalized for it. So because of that, they were able to write the language to rescind it because it'll just go in and be a part when it's all done together because nothing's been sent yet. I agree with that reasoning. I have additional reasoning. I have been unable to find any town in Massachusetts that has representative town meeting that has a floating quorum. There are 32, I think that's right, 32 towns in Massachusetts that have representative town meeting. My belief of the definition of representative means that we have equal opportunity representation across all districts, which means you don't just cut out seats unevenly. And that is what I think this quorum recommendation does. It puts our one minority precinct in jeopardy of having zero representation and zero opportunity for representation, because if the quorum is floating, then nobody is motivated to get anybody from precinct 1 to show up, or from any precinct that's missing. Plus, I believe that moving forward, it's and I think I explained all of this to you guys the last time we went through this. I believe that it is a really bad idea to put something in that requires a special act to change it. And that's revolving around how our quorum is figured out. And I also think that you have to think about how far in the future this could affect it. Meaning we could get to a point where nobody wants to show up for town meeting anymore, and it wouldn't matter. Because we could legally just function with however many people there were elected. Everyone said this couldn't happen. And my point is, it's not that it couldn't happen and that it wouldn't happen. My point is that if it did happen, it would be legal. Meaning we could have 180 seats and only fill 75 of them. And then we would base quorum on that. And so we could have mini precincts with no representation, and it would be legal for us to function and run town meeting. Not that that will happen, but that it would be legal if it did happen. So I would invite all town meeting members to please vote yes on motion A for the CBC Article 29 that rescinds it. And the reason mine went through no action is because it doesn't make sense to have two articles doing the same thing, and it's better to support their article doing it than my citizen's position.
Thanks for that, Brinley. I've got two initial questions, and perhaps others do as well. Let me state them both. You can answer in whichever order. When you were talking about how this would call for extensive record keeping of, for every town meeting session, figuring out how many members are actually elected. Is it possible to, I guess that raises a question in my mind as to at what point during the year or how frequently can it change how many elected town meeting members are there? If there were vacant seats, are there circumstances where people can become town meeting members outside of election season of being elected to them? And the second question has gone completely out of my mind. So maybe you or anyone else could address the first one, and then I'll try to remember the other one.
Sure. As I understand it, yes. People can, if there are open seats, you can't contest a seat. I don't know that you can't, but my understanding is that if it's full, there's nothing you can do about it until the next election. If the precinct is full, there's nothing you can do about it until the next election. But if someone leaves and drops out, or if there is an open seat, for instance, there's pretty much always, certainly since I've been paying attention, always open seats in precinct 1. Yes. A resident of precinct 1 can go and say, I'd like to be a town meeting member to the town clerk, and can get, there's a process, and they can become a town meeting member current at any point in time if there's an open seat.
Okay.
And it also from the other direction.
Able to figure out how to raise my hand.
Sorry. Oh, yeah, I've remembered the question too, but go ahead, Martin. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't, somehow the controls look different today. Brinley, I have a question about your feelings about Josh Ostroff's proposal, which certainly doesn't contradict what you're doing, but I think would help even more, which is he would cut down the membership of town meetings from 180 down to 120. I kind of think that it's not going to go that far. Maybe 150 would be a compromise. But what that would do is lower the total number of town meeting members, so that however many we could get in precinct 1 would be a larger percentage of the total. And I think that would tend to even it off a little bit.
So my thoughts are to hold off on that until we finish with motion A, because that's motion B and something entirely separate. So if it's okay, Martin, I do have that on my list to bring up, motion B. But if we could just finish motion A, that would be great.
Oh, you mean right now? Okay,
that's
sure.
actually a good segue to the second question that I remembered, which is, given that initially, Brinley, and as you've restated this morning, that the problems with floating quorum, as you see it weren't so much the procedural things of how to accurately count, but just conceptually the whole idea of it. Will Frank allow discussion on that topic during the, I mean, now that the substance of what you're asking for has been wrapped into this, is that going to limit discussion about kind of the philosophy and concept of this versus the procedural details or alternate proposals?
I am still learning how Frank functions and how he sees things. I did have extensive conversation with him about this and about the motions. I'm guessing that he is probably going to keep the questions pretty close to the chest for with regard to how they've phrased the motion, but I don't believe that he can stop people in discussion. So if you want to ask the question that is relevant to it, you can, and then in your own discussion, you can certainly bring it up as to why you're also supporting it. So I think that there is probably an opportunity to get that in there if necessary, and I will certainly be having a say in that. I am really hoping that because this is coming back through the CBRC with the logistical aspects, that town meeting will support this. It was very close. In fact, I am quite certain that if we'd had quorum, if we had taken this vote on a separate night with more people there, because I had called votes, and those people, excuse me, some of them had to leave and some of them weren't there that night. I do think that if it had come up on a different night, it would not have passed. Amendment C would not have passed. It was pretty discussed. There were a lot of people that had issues with it, with the equity of it. And I don't think that those issues have gone away. I do also intend to bring up that I don't think it's going to solve the problem that it's trying to solve. The reason it was brought up, my understanding from reading and from listening, is that the reason it was brought up is to help solve the problem of getting people there on time, enough people there on time to start town meeting on time. And this doesn't actually hold anybody accountable. Where we are right now, no one's held accountable to show up. You can get elected and never show up. We do have town meeting members who never show up, who've been elected repeatedly and just don't come. Town meeting fluctuates a lot in terms of who comes and who doesn't come, because it's time consuming. It's on a work night, it's on a school night, it's in the evening, we go late, discussions get long. Whatever the reasons are, life happens. And the CBRC group was used a lot of this reasoning, is that there are a group of people that are consistent, and then there are a group of town meeting members that aren't consistent in how they come. And so my thoughts around this are, using this as a way to get people to show up isn't going to be effective. It's just going to change the number of people that we have to get show up, not that it will make them show up. So it doesn't actually hold people accountable, which was the reason for doing this in the first place, was to try to make town meeting start sooner.
Mm-hmm. I see we've got two hands up. Judy?
Good morning. My quick question, and you may have stated it already as I was settling in, is how close to the 180 representatives are we typically running?
So I don't have all of those numbers. CBRC has been better at it, but in my time of paying attention, it seems like the most amount of people we get is between 120 and 130. In fact, the last two town meeting sessions have been the highest in recent history. There are oftentimes nights when there's only 101.
You're giving me attendance, right? You're giving me
yes, yes. Oh, you mean how many seats are filled of the 180?
Yeah, if you have any idea Or sense on that.
So that's also changed a lot over time. CBRC also did those numbers. That's my understanding is that has actually fluctuated a lot. We go through, the same sine wave that most things go through up and down. Consistently, precinct 1 will have 1 or 2 members and the other 16 seats will be empty. Precincts 7, 8, 9, and 10 are pretty consistently filled with all 18, and oftentimes have more frequently than the other precincts have contested elections. Not a lot. There's not a lot of contested elections in town meeting seats. Certainly not in recent history. Last March, when we went through this, there were 150, I believe, signed up to run with 30 empty seats. And then there was a large push for people to do write-in, excuse me, and participate. And with that, we filled a lot. So I think it runs between 160 and 170 in how many seats are actually sat.
Thank you.
Catherine?
There's an
About-
attendance thing.
About a
Yeah.
year ago, I shared with the CRBC, not once, but twice over a period of 6 months, research that I had unearthed about 6 towns of the 31 representative town meetings. We have 6 towns that have varying ways to enforce attendance. So for example, Swampscott, which is the most strict, is if you miss 3 in 1 year, then the seat is declared vacant, right? So you can't remove someone from town meeting. That's not something that can be done under Mass General Law, but you can say, oh, the seat is vacant. And every single one of these 6 different towns have appellate structures in place. So it's not just done. There's an opportunity to address it. So for example, when I raised that in a meeting, Kathy Collins said, well, geez, when I had my knee surgery, that would have automatically kicked me out. And the answer is, well, no, because in that, in a certain particular town, there are different, very generous ways to indicate, you're out of town, you're ill, for whatever reason. And the CRBC did not want to put those into the discussion, and the reason was that it was too close at that time to the attempts to remove Sue Ioni from town meeting. So my hope is that in the spring, either the CRBC, if they are active, or a citizen petition, could be put forward so that we can actually start to do this, because there are some precincts like 6, 7, 8, and 9 that have more running for the seats than actually get filled. And so maybe this is, something that we can do to enforce, people actually showing up and taking their responsibility seriously. There are a number of people, I went back about 6 years, who show up for the first town meeting because it's a social, and then they don't show up for the rest of them. So that's kind of my assessment of it.
Interesting. Wow. Donna, did you want to speak?
I do. I'm not speaking for the CBRC, but I am a member of the committee. And I think extended discussion on the quorum, I don't know that you have so many things to talk about today. The CBRC is withdrawing that floating quorum idea. The CBRC reconsidered it after much discussion. And I don't think we expect that there'll be extensive discussion on it from the town meeting floor. I think what Catherine said is interesting. I hope that the CBRC will come back to it. But, it's complicated too. It's with regret. I have a family wedding that's out of town. I'm missing 2 sessions of town meeting this fall. And, I feel terrible. I never, ever miss town meeting. So the whole idea of attendance has to be handled well. I mean, there are people who never show up at all. But anyway, this seems like a little bit off track from floating quorum. And I I just am anxious that people have the opportunity to talk about a couple of the other warrant articles. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Donna. Brinley, was there something significant that you wanted to bring to people's attention about motion B? Or perhaps someone else had asked about it, but I do want to be mindful of what Donna was saying too.
I can say that I listened to the conversation at FinCom. I only missed one night of FinCom this session. And I can say up front that I agree currently with all of the reasoning that was given for not supporting Mr. Obstroff's motion to shrink the size of town meeting, mostly because I do think it's too dramatic of a shrink, but also because I do think that in a town size of 37,000, that once we start shrinking the number of town meeting members too little, then we should just be looking at a different type of town governance. Because I don't think that it's really that representative anymore. I understand the idea of having competitive races for town meeting. But as somebody who has actually gone around and talked to neighbors and worked to get myself elected, the first time I was elected, I was a write-in. So I spend a lot of time going around and asking people and talking to people. Most of the people that I've spoken to have said, if I have to, and I know this is not look good for us, but this is where we are in time commitment. If I have to spend money and have yard signs and send letters, that if I have to spend money to be a town meeting member, I am less interested. And I get that. I completely understand that. There are ways to do it without spending money, but that has been a lot of what I've heard from people, is that I'm just not going to do it if I have to spend money to do it. And so I'm not sure that shrinking it so much in an effort to create competition that it will actually give the best candidate pool that we're looking for. Because I do think that there are a lot of people that are just known names, and so people just vote for them because they know them. And some of those people that are known names don't actually show up.
Mm-hmm. Martin, any response or thoughts?
Yeah, I had some thoughts. I'm really undecided on this. On the positive side, what I initially said may be true, that if you shrink the total number of town meeting members, that means you're shrinking the number from the precincts that are fully represented. So instead of precinct 10, for example, having 18 members, they'll have, well, 15 or 12. Which will give you a larger percentage from the precincts that don't fully populate their available seats, like precinct 1. So there's that positive advantage, but the negative advantage, I really do agree with what Brinley said, that it puts too high a bar for people who just want to participate. If you have to run against other people, it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. I had 3 campaigns for town meeting before I got in. And I'm not sure most people would go to that expense or aggravation. I'm not sure why I did, actually, sometimes. And Josh, actually, if he thinks back, he had the same situation. Right before me, he did not prevail in his first campaign for town meeting. It's hard to believe now because he's so well known, but back then he wasn't. Back then I wasn't well known. And we're running against people who've been in town and their families have been known in the town for hundreds of years, I guess. So yeah, I'm a little leery of that. Yeah, the bar to be in town meeting should be more than getting 1 write-in vote. I mean, that seems like you could do a little more effort than that, but it shouldn't be to run a $1,000 campaign that costs you 8 weeks of your of activities and knocking on doors. Although it's a good thing to knock on doors, I don't think that should be required.
Donna, did you want to add to the conversation? Donna, you had your hand up again.
I'm sorry, I was muted. I just want to say I actually agree with Brinley's assessment here. But from my view, I think shrinking the size of town meeting makes it less representative, less democratic, and I'm not sure why would we ever want to do that. I think that one really serious issue is we need to make it easier for people to participate in town meeting. And hopefully we'll have hybrid town meetings so that if somebody has to travel for a wedding or whatever, they can still participate in town meeting, or they've had surgery. I mean, I participated in school committee meetings from the hospital room. So I think town meeting is not as accessible as it needs to be. We have not considered childcare. There are a lot of ways that we can make town meeting more user-friendly and for people to step up. And if it's the case that people aren't stepping up because we're becoming this $1 million town with all of these tear downs and people don't want to be involved in municipal government, but they'd rather pay to have a city form of government, well, I see that as really tragic and really sad, but so be it. Thanks.
Yeah. Ooh, we probably could spend the rest of the hour on this, but let's.
I think it's good.
Yeah, but let's move on. I'm not seeing Victoria yet, but Rick is here. So Rick, why don't you start in on
Sure. Thank
turf
you.
fields? Yeah.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you,
Oh,
everybody.
and yeah, my mistake, by the way, on in the email of referring to Rick's survey as having to do with leaf blowers. It doesn't.
Yes, though I am looking forward to the leaf blower discussion because it's an issue of considerable aggravation and passion for me. I'm only a third of the team of people who have been involved in this artificial turf thing. Neither Roger Luckman, who is an MPH, can be here, or Tian Lum. I don't think he's going to be able to jump on. And they've done, both a good bit of research. I've stayed on top of it, and I can certainly do top line for this discussion today, anything that comes up. And we have talked to and are continuing to talk to experts outside. So, I think what I'll do is read this, and then anyone who's interested in giving me feedback, let me know. I'll send you a copy. It's a little formal for this group, but it's probably better. It's a better introduction and would save time as I thought about it from people asking questions about things. So let me just do that, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's easier from my laptop. Okay, the matter before us is one we believe affects our entire community and therefore deserves public debate. Any issue which risks the health of our children, the health of our environment, and our public health, as well as our welfare in an economic sense, would come before this body to be decided. In this case, though we are talking about known risks and ones unknown, both are serious enough to bring us here for a moratorium. All of these risks are receiving serious attention in towns, states, and countries around the world for the same reasons that we believe your attention is needed here. We're asking this body to support a moratorium, as other towns, state, and national bodies have done, on making what is a long-term investment in a product with a future that will depend on matters out of its control. What do I mean by that, out of its control? Artificial turf is fabricated out of chemicals which are themselves fabricated. To date, in any foreseeable future, these chemicals will contain known carcinogens and toxins that have been shown in animal and human labs to lead to disease, at least for those with significant direct exposure. Children growing up and playing on these fields will have significant direct exposure. Microplastic particles and any non-organic infill that supports the blades of fake turf will enter the children whenever they wipe their face with their hands and whenever they have a cut or abrasion. But it is not only our children or their families who have to clean their clothes, or the families who have to clean their clothes who risk being exposed. Because these chemicals, including PFAS, which has been found in measurable quantities on all plastic blades of grass, they leach from fields and runoff and enter our groundwater and adjacent aquatic bodies. There is some risk to public health. It's a rather long sentence. This risk is to be mitigated in our drinking water at some expense in our new water filtration system under development. Wildlife and habitats of all kinds have no such protection without our taking action. In April, the EPA lowered the tolerance limits of 6 of the 5,000 PFAS chemicals and issued new guidelines on more. They also made it clear that there is no safe limit in parts per trillion for the PFAS they've studied. Future regulation and litigation is foreseeable on the horizon, perhaps in the near future. The Synthetic Turf Council, the trade body of turf manufacturers, announced in April also that they would not have testing protocol for PFAS until 2026. Whether manufacturers can create a plastic product that meets the testing limits of new regulations remains to be seen. This would all be enough reason to adopt our proposed moratorium for 3 years. But there is more risk and more reason, beginning with another challenge which plastic turf manufacturers have not yet proven they will ever overcome. That challenge is heat. Artificial turf heats to an extreme temperatures of 150 to 180 degrees, becoming unplayable due to the very real risk of burns, dehydration, heat exhaustion, heat stroke, and even cardiac arrest. With climate change accelerating globally, and right here, any possible product improvements to lower heat on their surfaces is likely to be a moving target they must continue to reach to remain competitive with natural grass field surfaces that reflect the actual air temperature. Our health department started measuring surface temperatures on hot days with infrared, testing late in August and September this year. They measured artificial turf at 150 degrees and grass at 85, a 65-degree difference at the same time on the same day. A soccer camp had to adjust their schedule as a result of testing on one day. Next year, camps and schools will be required by the MAII to do wet bulb testing above turf fields on hot days. I'll turn this over now to a member, and then Tien has done a lot of research on all aspects of this. Other towns that have put through moratoriums, as well as the cost analysis. We've read several cost analyses that have been done by independent bodies. And the bottom line is that because there is so much expense other than the product built in, which is very expensive, built into artificial turf installation and removal and transportation costs to recycling, it ends up being, as we've seen in town meeting, over $1 million to install a new field. Just replacing the field, Memorial Field at the high school recently cost $600,000. And all of that plastic and the cushioning underneath it and the impermeable surface underneath that is all fossil fuel byproduct that is going to sit in a landfill, and degrade forever when it happens. So there are also certainly with the cost, there are maintenance expenses to both artificial turf and grass fields, and there are site preparation things which need to happen. Artificial turf requires a lot of digging and a lot of heavy construction. There's a lot of CO2 in all of that process, as well as in the ridding of it and the transportation of it when it's done. The life cycle of it is about 10 years. During that 10 years, the particles are constantly degrading and, turning into smaller things that are become so small that they can't be filtered out by the kind of filtration system that was installed at Kennedy School when they put that in. It's a dandy looking. I was impressed when I saw it. They recapture the water in a holding tank at Kennedy, and they filter it, and then it goes into the landscaping around Kennedy Brown. And that's a great idea, except that filtration is obviously not going to filter out PFAS, and that PFAS is then going to end up in the groundwater under Kennedy Brown and in the wetlands around it. It's been found in measurable quantities in adjacent aquatic bodies and wetlands to these turf fields where there's no other source of it. So I'm sort of going back into the chemistry, but the cost is a big question. You've got interest. It comes out of the capital budget. Cole Center, desperately, that turf field there, which is huge, bigger than Memorial Field. I think it's 115,000 square feet. Is slated to be redone. It desperately needs to be redone. And like the Memorial Field, you can, if you go and you see it, and then you look at Memorial Field, you can see the difference in these two fields. What I would say also that I haven't mentioned, and then I'll stop, and other things will come up as we address questions, is that the alternatives to doing this, the reasons for doing this, are to extend playable hours. The lack of enough space and athletics for athletic fields in Natick was identified a long time ago, I think in Natick 2030. And that shortage has only become more acute. I'm familiar with the fields. I live near them at the high school. The two grass fields that are used primarily for soccer and field hockey and lacrosse for JV sports are, I'd say, in playable condition. They're lined and they're used, and they're heavily used. The field that is being considered for artificial turf is behind Memorial Stadium. It's between Memorial Stadium and the drills. It's used, football is narrower than soccer. It's used, I believe, for some JV football. It's in terrible shape, much worse shape than the other two grass fields. If you look at it and walk on it, it's very visible to the eye, without having any expertise in turf, of which I have little, but not none. So that field is next to, it's going to come under the jurisdiction of conservation, who we've talked to, Claire Wendelli, quite a bit, because there is a wetlands within 100 feet of it. And there's also a stream that runs through, so it may, depending on things, also have to be treated as a river front property, which requires alternate venue analysis. But it's our understanding that in order to try to expand hours, the high school is, and I'll conclude with this, the high school is doing a design study that the town meeting approved in the spring, and they are inclined to want to put artificial turf on that because for various reasons they have not managed that field as well as they have others, and that may have something to do with a staff shortage, difficulty hiring people to do things. They certainly have the equipment to aerate and recover a field and even manage it organically, which other towns are doing, like Marblehead, and getting a lot of playable hours out of them. So it's not a question of, there's no rocket science in it. Organically managed fields, are good. The grass develops deep roots. They don't tend to need any pesticide, and if they do, it does not have to be one that would be on a do not use list. And the fertilization is limited. They require a little more maintenance, aeration 4 times a year and so forth. But when you compare the cost of that expense with paying the interest and the capital cost over the life cycle of an artificial turf field, you're basically looking at a ratio of somewhere 2 to 1 or greater, depending on how much you spend on the artificial turf field. The one that was put in at the Kennedy does not have the crumb rubber infill, the 200 tons of that Memorial Field and Cole Field had originally before they were worn down. So why don't I stop there, and I hope I've given you enough idea of the range of issues and the degree to which we think these issues really need thorough investigation and a pause before we make another long-term investment in a product with this kind of dubious future and liability.
Let's see, Brinley's the first one with her hand up. Thank you, Rick, by the way, very much. Brinley?
I just want to, I'm not a part, I just will say, even though I'm a part of EcoNatic, I'm not a part of this with Rich this morning, but I do support it. And I will say there's a lot of stuff that he didn't bring up that I think is important. We are not the first in doing this. We will not be the last in doing this. It's a moratorium, not a ban. It is merely taking the opportunity to look more deeply into it before we do any more, which I think is a really important point. And once you start really diving into the depths of the environmental impact of these, it's pretty deep. It's really, really pretty deep. I put 2 links in the chat where Boston's been talking about it. There are so many towns in Massachusetts that are already doing this and across the country. And so I do hope that people actually take a real serious look about this.
Thanks, Brinley, and thanks for the links. One of them I just briefly displayed, and I'll follow up in our email as usual with the others. Donna, and then MetroWorks also had their hand up. But Donna?
I can raise a hand for you if you want 2 hands.
No, it's okay.
I'm sorry, I keep forgetting to turn my sound on. I just want to thank Rick and Roger and Tian. I think this is just an exquisite article. You got me on children's health. I mean, I think we can't afford not to take a moratorium on something like this if it's going to impact in any way the health of our children. And I understand, having served on the school committee, I understand the compelling need for more turf hours. I do, I get it, but nothing is more important than the health of our kids. And I'm impressed by how thoroughly researched this has been. And I really hope that you'll join with them and support this warrant article in whatever ways possible. It's not doing this forever. It's just like, let's take a wait and see what more of the research is. And just as Memorial Field, the high school field, is better than the ones with rubber, the coal field, for example, there may be better ways of doing this in the future that are safer. So let's just take this moratorium. It's important. Thank you.
Thanks, Donna. MetroWorks, your hand's down, but was there someone
Yeah.
that question?
We have 3 people, Cindy, Bill, and then me.
I have
Okay.
2 quick questions for you, Rick. One is, how long is the artificial turf field supposed to last? And the second question is, when you wash clothes, what happens, and you're in Natick, what happens to that water?
Well, the first question is easy to answer. It's about 10 years that an artificial turf field lasts, but like anything, it depends on how heavily it's used. So for instance, coal field, where the crumb rub, so much of the turf blade has worn off that when you look at the field, it looks sort of gray and light green. And if you move anything on that field, you will see the crumb rubber. And the crumb rubber itself is something that the industry is moving away from because it's indefensible. The heavy metals in there, the zinc, the lead, the chromium, etc. I mean, it's terrible what's in that stuff. And that is also in Memorial Field. You don't see it in Memorial Field yet. As you look at it, it looks beautiful. But if you do what I did, which is you go and you put your finger on it and you press a little bit and you move your finger, you'll see the gray in it and you can smell it. It's Kennedy that does not have crumb rubber in it, and that's meant for sort of smaller bodies and lesser impact than the other 2 fields have. It has an organic infill in it. Somebody told me what it is, but I've forgotten. And so it's possible to have these fields without crumb rubber, if that was a question, which I forgot.
Just how long? That's fine. And the other question about water?
Well, about water, I mean, runoff in the kind of storms we're having now.
Water from when you wash your clothes.
Oh, from when you wash your clothes. I mean, that water basically goes into, I'm not really sure where that goes, but I think because of all, does anybody know?
Yeah, I can jump in on that one.
Jump in, thank you.
For most of there is a small number of people in Natick who have on-site septic systems, a private septic system. In which case it would go into the ground on your property, but the vast majority of Natick is served by the MWRA sewer system. So it goes down the pipe out to Boston, out to the Deer Island treatment plant, and ultimately is discharged in the ocean. So that's where that would go.
And I have one more. Are any of our regular fields irrigated? And is that something that would be needed to do in case of drought moving forward?
You mean, are any of our grass fields irrigated?
Yes.
That's a good question too. I believe so. I think given the drought that we're in right now and that we've had and how green those fields look, there is some watering going on. I can tell you that it really, one of the things that has to happen, because it isn't just, well, bacteria form on artificial turf fields for obvious reasons. I mean, there's all sorts of contact, human and animal and other, with the turf. So it needs to be cleaned. And that also goes into drainage. But you don't really need to water them, an irrigation system on them. They tried cooling them down on very hot days where temperatures reach, ridiculous things, but they don't stay cool. As long as the sun is out and the heat is up, they're going to heat back up within 20 minutes to where they were. So that is probably a waste of water to do that, if anyone was thinking about cooling off turf fields.
I was thinking about regular fields.
Yeah, well, please do.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think Art Goodhind, who is the turf expert who's worked for Natick for, I think, quite some time, was here in 2015, 16, 17, 18, when there was a pilot program for 3 years on 3 fields in Natick to organically manage fields. So we don't lack expertise in this topic. And I'm sorry to say that neither the school committee nor the school department or DPW really has responded to our efforts to speak with them, or our emails or our calls. There's been very little contact with them, and the only conversation I had with the new athletic director, the first words out of his mouth were, "I love artificial turf." So I'm sensing, as has Tien, who has talked with Matt Gillis quite a bit, and John Marshall quite a bit, both have, that the high school is leaning in the direction of artificial turf.
We have Bill and then myself over here.
Rick, that was a great job. Well done. I would suggest you try and tighten it up a little bit, because I think you may lose some folks, but really good point. Donna's point about the health of the kids, I think is really important. One bullet point under that I would add is that if these kids get damaged or get cancer or get something bad, the town's going to get sued for a hell of a lot of money. So there's a liability issue. You might want to just a bullet point. And then the biggest opposition is playing time, which we've already talked about. So just to the extent you can address that and deal with it as best you can, it's going to come up. So
right,
great job.
That we do have somebody who can speak to that, who has studied that. And Marblehead, for instance, they do all organically managed fields, and they get 1,800 hours out of them. They lost 5 days in 2018, 3 to rain and 2 to heat. And yeah, no, there's a lot on that. And what was your first point?
Just that if you could tighten it up a little bit, I think you may lose some of the town meeting members. It was
but you said playing time. Oh, and the litigation. Yeah, I did look into litigation, and there is, litigators are drooling over this industry right now, and there's plenty of interest in finding and bringing lawsuits against manufacturers and defending plaintiffs and defending manufacturers from turf lawsuits. And there have been.
Yeah, you can be sure the town will be one of the folks sued. That's all. That's my point.
Exactly. The town. Yes, exactly. Towns, recreation departments, and schools, high schools and universities. I mean, that's an ongoing, that is the definite concern. I can't point to one, but there've been things that have been settled. I mean, there were the 5 Philadelphia Phillies players who died of glioblastomas in their 40s, who had played their career on artificial turf at Philadelphia, which no longer has artificial turf. And I think there were settlements in that case, I believe.
I know Martin has a question or comment, and I know Sarah does, but I also want to be mindful of the time. And maybe after those two, we'll move to Victoria and let her present about gas leaf blowers, and then we can open it up for questions on either of those or other articles. So Martin.
Rick, I just want to emphasize what really won over my vote at the FinCom meeting, without even having to follow up and verify all your research, which I haven't yet done. But it's people ask me, was this article going to rip up all of our turf fields? And that's pretty radical. And no, it doesn't. Those are going to stay there until they, I guess, finish their useful lives. It's not even going to prevent any new turf fields in the future. It's just a 3-year moratorium, so we don't get any deeper into the problem if we verify that there is a problem. And it gives us the time for everybody, including those who aren't experts on this and may not be convinced of the problem, to check it out and make sure we're not getting in deeper to something that we don't want to get into. So I think that's a very important point to emphasize. And you've definitely done a lot of good homework and have a lot of good presentations, but definitely it's a fairly modest proposal, and I think that should give it some strength in getting through town meeting.
Yeah, and in terms of reinstalling Coalfield, which is the one that needs to be done, anything that gets the current field out of there is an improvement, in my view, personally. I can't speak for others on that. But thank you.
Yeah. Sarah?
So you touched on a question. I have a comment and a question. I think touched on a question I was going to raise, because I think it might come up of, what about fields that professional athletes play on? And you did just touch on that recently, that apparently it's a very similar material, it sounds like, and there have been documented issues that have been raised about that. So, that's I think an area where, there's a lot of money to be made in professional football. And if they're even seeing it there, that's something noteworthy. But the comment I was going to make, that again, you touched on, but I think, maybe needs or could be emphasized a little more, is, from my understanding, these are touted as recyclable products, but in actuality, they are not there yet in how to recycle it. And it's an aspirational thing, but I haven't seen a lot of documentation of actual successful recycling of these things when they get removed. And partly that troubles me, just because I wish they would be recycled. Partly it also troubles me if these did get to be classified with the presence of the PFAS and so forth as something hazardous, coming out of the world that I come from in waste site cleanup. The way the laws are written, another potential liability issue if the town goes to dispose of this and it does end up in a landfill somewhere, and the town could be back on the hook for a piece of the cleanup of that site. And that's probably a somewhat far-fetched thing, but it is just something to be aware of as another.
I think Sarah, thank you for bringing that up. There is some of the recycling has, some of the disposal has definitely gone to Malaysia, where they do not respond to requests about where it went in Malaysia. But the theory is that it went straight into a landfill in Malaysia. And part of the reason that the turf manufacturers take on the liability for where it goes, you're responsible for the the removal and the transportation, but some of them seem to be trying to make sure that you don't have that objection in your mind. The crumb rubber actually is something that could be recycled because it is recycled already, and they can do that endlessly. As for the rest of it, I'm dubious that any of it would be profitable to recycle. The plastic worn down blades and so forth. I don't, the question is, at what cost? Even if it could be recycled, are you going to take this stuff, clean it, do what needs to be done, and then find a market to put it into? I don't know. Hopefully there would be, but
yeah, I mean, I need to do more digging on it myself from that topic, but certainly what I saw so far, the concept of quote unquote recycling seems more aspirational than actual.
And good old Brinley has put a link in the chat to a Washington Post or Atlantic article about that aspect of it. So thanks for that, Brinley. Let's move to Victoria Grafflin at this point so we can hear about the third citizen petition article having to do with, is it banning or somehow restricting gas leaf blowers? Welcome, Victoria.
Thanks.
Oh,
Okay, so I don't need my microphone.
Speaker in Mexico.
Yeah. No problem. That's how it was, and I wasn't sure what it was gonna do.
Yeah, that's gonna pick
At
up.
my office, we've had these owl things, and we get the submarine, calls when, anyway.
Let's move it even closer so you're.
Okay, thanks. All right, well, thanks everybody for inviting me. On behalf of EcoNatick, again, we have another town meeting warrant article, and this one is about restricting the use of gas-powered leaf blowers, gas, i.e. internal combustion engine leaf blowers, in case somebody uses some other thing that's not gasoline that I'm not aware of. And I have a PowerPoint, so I'm going to share that if I may. And I guess what I should ask is can I share my screen from here?
Yeah,
Okay.
I want to turn off the video on your laptop because I think it's confusing. It should be
Yeah.
picked up by the
owl.
by the
Okay.
owl. Yeah, I think everybody else is gonna see the MetroWorks picture in their screen. We don't because we. Yeah, very good.
Okay, let's see.
You're
right.
fancy.
Well, I did a PowerPoint. It's not that great, but it's something to look at. Ooh, excuse me. So,
Can you get into a slideshow view?
it's that, sorry, yes. I'm sort of,
I forget where it is.
hold on, it's right over here.
That's it. I think you have it.
Oh, there.
no, that's a new slide. It's up at the menu bar. Slideshow start from beginning.
Places.
Nope, to the right.
Oh, there we go. Sorry
Yeah.
about that. Yeah, I usually go on the bottom.
Yeah,
and
it's there.
Why is it giving?
From
me-
beginning all the way on the left.
Go not now on that one and then from the beginning.
That's it.
Yeah.
There we go. Sorry
Perfect.
about that.
We got it.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a little rusty on a Monday morning. I apologize. Okay, so this is Article 32. I'm not gonna read all of these, but I will just sort of start with, well, what is this about? It's about restricting the use of gasoline powered leaf blowers in Natick. Okay, here we go. So it's got some, hold on, let me just make sure I'm doing this. Okay, so here's the actual motion.
Inside the church.
And it's 2 pages here. So we've got some definitions of what leaf blowers are we talking about. The gasoline powered ones, there's something, the wheeled leaf blowers are different than other leaf blowers, and then non-gasoline powered leaf blowers. It's like everything else. And here's kind of the meat and potatoes of what we would be doing. Basically, it would be a 2-year restriction on the use of gasoline powered leaf blowers outside of the spring and fall cleanup periods. Defined by those dates. And then 2 years later, it would be a full ban on using gasoline powered leaf blowers with a couple of exemptions as described below. Just hold on. So it wouldn't apply to private or public properties above 1.5 acres. It wouldn't apply if there was a state of emergency. You don't want people going, wait a minute, during a state of emergency. And sorry, I thought there was more. Yeah, those are the exemptions. So a couple of exemptions. I thought there was an exemption on the wheeled leaf blowers as well, but maybe I didn't have that in there. Sorry. Let me just
Did I?
oh, what happened?
Oh, it's our whole screen.
Oh, okay.
It's not in here.
Yeah, it's only our screen. I think everybody else can see
Oh
it.
my gosh,
It's
that's
just,
great.
it's our screen and Metroworks. It is,
Look out the window. So it is.
Judy, look out the window.
I don't know what.
Oh, my goodness. And this is
There, but I-
where says like, yeah, skip the
Okay.
jacket, skip the umbrella.
I just touched this with my phone.
It'll stop before I need to walk.
It will.
Wow.
Can you guys hear us still? Here we go.
there we go.
All
Yeah.
right. I think we're back. Can we be heard? I can't.
Okay.
We can hear you, yes.
Yeah,
There was a little,
Sorry about that. Something under the table.
Thank you.
Sorry
okay.
about that.
So we have these exemptions. Funny, I actually thought the wheeled ones were exempt, but I'll have to look into that. And then there's some enforcement. This was based on similar types of enforcement within Article 92 of the Natick bylaws. There's all kinds of things, public nuisance type things that have very similar types of enforcement. Including, believe it or not, if somebody's swearing in public, you can actually call the police and ask them to do that. That is in Article 92. But what I really want to talk about is why. And I'm just going to give you a second to read this because I personally think that this is extremely important. The why here, why now? So we've become accustomed to accepting whatever industry, people, whatever kind of foist upon us for their convenience, for their pleasure, whatever it is, we've really become accustomed in our society to this is the way it is, we have to accept it. And I truly object to that because it is damaging our health, our happiness, and it's really impacting our children's future, frankly. I know people are aware of this theoretically. I'm not sure that everybody really understands just how important all of that is. So to me, this is the big why. Honestly, before I did my finance committee presentation, that particular day was one of the big leaf blower days. I'm working at home and I open the window, and the second I open the window, one of my 5 contiguous properties around mine, somebody starts a leaf blower, and it's all of 30 to 50 feet away from me, right? It's loud, so I have to shut the window, of course. And I was out on my back patio, and somebody behind my house, behind the neighbor's house and across the street, which I can now see because there are far less trees in my neighborhood than there were, started a gas powered leaf blower. So this is about 1,000 feet away, and I could smell and taste the fumes from it from my back patio, because those fumes, that plume of pollution gets blasted. And I'm an asthmatic, I have asthma, and so I'm also very sensitive to that. But that's a really unacceptable level of air pollution being emitted from somebody else. And frankly, I think it's probably illegal. If you actually looked at all the, emissions and particulate stuff, it's probably not even legal. But we've ignored it because, well, people have landscapers for their property, so that's what we have to do, right? Anyway, but one of the things that might have changed, the sort of why now, is that last year, put out a big report about lawn care equipment. And I think they put it out now because there are good alternatives to gasoline powered lawn care equipment. But their report really documents the actual facts about just how bad these things are. And leaf blowers, gasoline powered leaf blowers are particularly bad when it comes to things that emit pollution in our environment. Typically, they are two-stroke engines, which during this process, I've learned one of the reasons two-stroke engines are so bad is because they're very inefficiently mixing the gasoline and the oil. And they're not combusting everything, but they're emitting a whole lot of the partially combusted stuff. And one of the worst parts about that are particulates. There's been a lot of research, and I have read several articles about just how damaging particulate matter is in terms of our health. And, you know, we don't notice it as much anymore because modern vehicles mostly have catalytic converters, and, you know, we don't see the smog coming out as badly as we used to maybe in like the 70s. And, you know, Boston isn't covered by a orange haze anymore, largely due to the regulations, the environmental regulations on vehicle emissions and also industrial emissions. But the particulates that come out are really, really bad. You know, some of them are so small that they can get through that barrier in your lungs and get into your blood vessels. They actually damage the blood vessels as they're going in. I mean, the people who are using these leaf blowers without some kind of masks are probably at extreme risk for serious health issues. So that's one thing. Particulates matters. And you can see some of the statistics I've put here about just, most of the statistics were from 2020 in this report. But the lawn and garden equipment in the US, this is lawn and garden equipment. This is not like industry that, you know, we have to survive, emitted 21,800 tons of fine particulates, just the particulates. And that's the equivalent pollution to 234 million typical cars. I mean, that's insane. It's an enormous amount of particulates that's spewing from these little things, right? These little leaf blowers. So
So
and
that
then,
includes lawnmowers when you,
yes, the lawn and garden equipment thing includes
Yeah.
all that type of lawn and garden equipment. Whatever is, yes, lawnmowers are also a big one. But the reason we're focusing on leaf blowers is because they're actually worse than lawnmowers in some ways. And I don't quite totally understand it, but I think lawnmowers have like carburetors and they're a little bit better somehow. They're also a little more necessary, frankly, during like the summer, but I'll get into that in a second. So there's other terrible things that are emitted. There's volatile organic compounds or VOCs, there's nitrogen oxide, and those two mix at ground level and they create ozone, which, as the Department of Agriculture says, ground level ozone causes more damage to plants than all other air pollutants combined. So that's pretty bad. And then, of course, CO2, it's, you know, greenhouse gases. And benzene and formaldehyde are also emitted from these very polluting two-stroke engines. And there are other things that have these terrible two-stroke engines, but. And then noise pollution, you know, this is the thing that people most notice. And when people go, I hate those things, it's usually the noise pollution that most people are focusing on. And there have been a lot of studies about just how bad noise pollution is. And believe it or not, there was this 2013 study in the UK of sort of the similar level of constant noise pollution that leaf blowers produces. And they actually documented, I didn't put the number they said, of additional heart attacks, strokes, and mental health issues that were caused just by the noise pollution. And these leaf blowers have this low frequency decibel. You've probably found that when you close your window to try to block it out, it really doesn't work that well. Everything's bothered by it, you know, beautiful you know, the robins and the cardinals that are coming to do the things they need to survive in your yard, they can't stand this either. I have 2 cats. They don't go out anymore, but when they did, they'd come in as soon as somebody put a leaf blower on, because it hurts their ears. It's damaging to everything. So anyway, the alternatives, the electric and battery powered ones, produce significantly less noise. I didn't bring mine today, but happy to demonstrate to anybody who wants to see. So something that, I'm cheesy graphic here, I'm not a professional PowerPoint person, but anyway, something that really struck me about this report was that they broke it down by county, the 100 most polluting lawn and garden equipment counties in the US. And Middlesex County was in the top 3rd. I was really shocked by that, you know, little Middlesex County here, apparently we need our hyper manicured lawns, you know, and gardens, I guess more than most people in the country. So that's a lot just from our country alone, or our county, sorry. And this is again, 2020 statistics, who knows what it is now. So why now? So again, I said US PIRG put out this report, I think because the title of their report actually says we have alternatives. There are good alternatives now. And so if we're going to do this, let's do it at a time where there are realistic alternatives for people. I quoted this guy, Dan Mabe. He's from an organization called the American Green Zone Alliance. He did a presentation in Wellesley just a couple of months ago about this kind of issue. The American Green Zone Alliance works with communities to get away from gas-powered lawn and garden equipment, and he is from the industry. He spent years using the polluting equipment and decided that, you know, something had to change. Sorry, am I at my time? Okay.
Nope,
I got a
nope,
couple
keep
more
going.
minutes. All right, I thought his quote was good. I was watching, it's a video, actually, you can find this video. He said, these kinds of bans and restrictions are not going away. More and more communities are going to be doing this because there's really no good reason to be continuing this level of pollution. So, at least 10 Massachusetts municipalities have some form of restriction. This is an area I need to do a little more work in, because I've been trying to contact some of them and find out how it's going. And I've gotten mixed results, plus I have limited time myself to do all of this. But I'll probably add the list to this PowerPoint if I'm gonna be presenting this at actual town meeting. I'm gonna make some changes to this. Yeah, yeah. And then, Consumer Reports recently also did an issue on are gas or electric leaf blowers better. They actually came out finding that in pretty much every category, an electric or battery powered leaf blower was on balance better, in part, of course, because of the lack of pollution, the cost over the life of the piece of equipment. I think there was one category in which the gas powered leaf blowers continued to perform better. It was a very particular type of blowing, like I forget what it was exactly, but basically they were like, you know, they're very good, affordable electric / battery powered leaf blowers now. They don't require much maintenance. You don't have to fill them with gas. They're not, you know, silently killing you and your neighbors and everything around with the pollution. And they're a lot quieter, you know, people don't feel as bothered by them. So that's partly the why now. And then, you know, getting back to sort of the bigger picture about making the shift, you know, I feel like this is something that we need to talk about when we're talking about public policy and, you know, living together in community, as we all do all the time, that we need to make shifts all the time to accommodate what's going on around us. You know, we're all making shifts because we don't like the noise of leaf blowers by closing our windows and stuff. But, you know, maybe if we make shifts together away from, you know, what this American Green Zone Alliance calls hyper manicured landscapes, you know, that's something we can consider. It's not that long ago that I remember nobody had a weekly, sort of commercial level lawn care company come to their property. Like, this was not a thing when I was, even an adult, a young adult. It's a very recent thing, I think, where people looked at, commercial buildings and they saw these guys with their blowers and, we're like, wow, I could get that. And the lawn care companies, of course, they were like, this is a great service we could provide weekly. We get, when we're not doing, a lot of people do snow plowing and then lawn care, snow plowing in the winter and lawn care in the summer. But a lot of it's not really lawn care. A lot of it is that sort of commercial level, frankly, dirt blowing. And, this is the reason for the restriction and why I feel the restriction during the non-cleanup periods should not be considered a major imposition on anyone. Because what are they doing when it's not leaf season? They're blowing dirt and they're blowing a few, and when I say they, I mean everybody, whether it's commercial or residents. You're blowing a few grass clippings from the sidewalk or your driveway, and basically a lot of dirt, frankly. That's, if you look around, that's what's being blown. That's terrible to blow dirt, by the way, terrible for everybody. And that can be accomplished whether you're using a really inexpensive battery powered one, or whether you're using a broom. That can actually be accomplished pretty easily. I don't think that's a major impact or shift on anybody, frankly. So my hope is that people will realize, we can make some shifts. We used to not do it that way, and we could do it differently again. But I've put some resources up here. AGZA.net, that's the American Green Zone Alliance. I would definitely recommend people look at their website because they do work with communities to try to make this shift, particularly in the public sector. Eco Quiet Lawn Care is a local organization started by a guy in Lexington, I believe, and he is doing this off memory. I believe he's a Harvard researcher who's researched the impacts of noise pollution in particular. So he's got some chops. And then, believe it or not, our legislature is also looking at measures to reduce the impact on landscape maintenance companies by offering grants so that they could buy new equipment. So, again, I think that, so thank you, that's the basic presentation. So I think the time is nigh and I think we should do this. That's my.
Thanks, Victoria, very much for that. I know I've got one question, perhaps others do as well. For commercial lawn care companies, whose equipment inventory is 100% in gas products right now, do we know, are there lawn care companies that are offering an electric-based service? I'm just thinking of the person that thinks that they still need to have this care done and would be willing to pay, and isn't going to do it themselves, and would be willing to pay somebody to do it. Are there people that use electric-based
Yes.
tools?
Oh, sorry. You can still hear me, right?
Yep.
I don't know why my camera isn't on.
No, it's okay. We can see you through the owl. Yeah.
You can see me through the owl. Yeah.
Top camera and that.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, there are companies that have basically seized the opportunity, the interest that people have in being more green. And so they're capitalizing on, hey, people want green lawn care companies. There's one in Natick that serves the Natick-Wellesley Weston area called Pure Solutions that people have probably heard of. They're not specifically the people who mow the lawn, they're the people who do the chemical stuff. But they only use natural products, meaning people hire them to do mosquito control and they use, I think, peppermint oil and nutmeg or something. Very low impact type stuff. That's their whole business. We hired them to do some seeding for us for our lawn. And we had them for some fertilizer. I was like, I don't need any more of that. But I asked the guy because he took out his gas powered leaf blower after they did the seeding. I don't even know why he was doing this because he didn't cut anything. And I was like, no, stop, you don't have to do that. And I said, do you guys have any electric ones or battery ones? And he's like, oh yeah, we do. I just didn't get it today. But there are companies who exclusively do the mowing and the blowing and all that. I can probably find a couple of links. I was hesitant to put up the company name on my PowerPoint that I was aware of, because I didn't want to seem to be endorsing any particular company, but maybe if I can find a few.
I think it would be good.
Yeah.
Or it just to at least make the statement that there are
Yeah,
companies that will provide that service. It might be useful for you.
I think I've seen a truck in Natick that advertises on its truck that they do all electric lawn care landscaping.
Interesting.
They're
Pat,
around.
to-
I think Pat had his hand up.
Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. I really support your initiative. My understanding though is that the commercial landscapers, the mow and blow guys, the way they make their money is to blast through as many yards as they can in a day. And so how do you, that profit incentive, you know, that's why we have every time we have an affordable house, you know, 4,000 or 5,000 square footer goes up, because the economics of it, you know, are too enticing to use. So
Yeah.
Yes,
And this
Howard.
is something we have to talk about. You know, that we need, whatever it is we're doing in our community should not always be driven by the profit of somebody else. Like, I really think we have to raise this occasionally. And that if we feel that it's really bad to have something happen in our community, while I appreciate that, you know, these commercial landscapers need to make a living, that should not drive, I feel, what we, you know, the way we live our lives. So to speak to that though, I've looked into, again, the Consumer Reports article was very clear, the Consumer Reports study, I should say, it was doing commercial level, you know, equipment. American Green Zone Alliance, you know, works on this, that's their whole mission. There's equipment available that's would enable you to go lawn to lawn just as quickly as, you know, as they do now. The restriction we're talking about in Natick does not impact lawn mowers. And lawn mowers are those giant things and they go in about 10 seconds and do someone's lawn. It's just the leaf blowers. Again, for 2 full years, it wouldn't impact the way anybody does anything during the fall and spring cleanup. But you know, again, when I watch these guys out my window, you know, when I'm working from home, I can see them all around me. I see what their practices are, and the amount of leaf blowing they're doing during the summer months is not very much. It's really just that extra cleanup, and I don't really see how, other than the fact that they would need to buy more equipment. And there are different ways, people use them slightly differently sometimes, because you do have, you know, you need to have a battery that you're, you know, you need to exchange the battery. The newer equipment can go for 90 minutes at a time. So if you're spending 10 minutes doing the leaf blowing in August on a property, you should be able to use that same battery for several properties without having to switch out. The batteries that you buy, you can go to Home Depot and look at all this. They're interchangeable across manufacturers too. So for example, we have a battery powered lawnmower and leaf blower. And we just, you know, we have 2 batteries, and while one's charging, one's being used, and we interchange them between the pieces of equipment, you know, pretty seamlessly.
Thank you. Rick and MetroWorks both have hands up. I do need to be a little bit mindful of the time as well, but.
Yeah, just a quick thing. I think the noise factor is pretty real, and I don't think it diminishes that much when you get away from two-stroke machines, which, you know, Massachusetts and probably many other towns had, as of in 2023, they had legislation filed to ban two-stroke engines, which would be, you know, for dirt bikes and everybody else. And I'm not sure whether that passed or not, or whether it's in committee or something. But the particulate matter, the noise and the particulate matter remain huge issues. The pollution is a little less when you don't have a very inefficient two-stroke engine, for sure. But I think the thing that gets most of us you know, people working at home now. I mean, it's incredibly disruptive. Particularly when you live in a development like we do, where these guys just every Tuesday they maraud around the common areas. And, you know, I frequently schedule things off campus, if you will, during that time, because you know, you can't go outside, you can't sit outside, and you can't take a walk through here then. I mean, it just stinks. And, you know, I'm trying to get them to, you know, not do that here, but yeah, it's a big job. And I think that your idea about the Green Zone Alliance thing for some education would be really interesting to look at. People want research. I know Quiet Communities. I've been in touch with them in the past, and they have research on all of this stuff, which Victoria knows too. So anyway, great presentation, Victoria. I think this should pass. At least I do know in Cambridge that they passed a similar thing, a seasonal ban, you know, for cleanups, and that was years ago, and they're still with that. They have not moved to a full ban of them yet. We can talk about that. There are reasons for that, but I talked to my sister about it yesterday in Cambridge.
Good, well,
Thanks.
reach out to me separately offline and we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
Looks like there's a couple of other hands.
Yeah, Metro work.
Victoria, as I recall, actually I have some notes from the FinCom meeting. There was a 6-2 vote for referral, which isn't the greatest vote, but it's not the worst either. But so I assume you're going to bring that up as a positive motion despite the FinCom's lack of support.
I don't know, I guess.
I don't know, that's the way that, yeah, you should. I mean, it's entirely possible to overcome a FinCom lack of endorsement. I don't think it's a lot.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you've gotten any support from other allies like the Concom or Board of Health. And the second part of the question is, what can we do to try to build support?
Those are great questions. I'll be honest, I haven't had a lot of time to do a whole lot else since the FinCom meeting. I sort of put all my eggs in the basket getting ready for that, and I, kind of collapsed and had to focus on other things since then. But I have been trying to reach out or get other people to help reach out to some of the communities that already have it to find out how it's working in those communities. I plan on having some information to answer questions or provide during town meeting on that. I do need to do a little more outreach internally. I've been a little hesitant, I'll be honest. I probably need to reach out to Chief Hicks. I'm not sure the DPW, because really, I don't think this is going to impact them much, since most of their properties are above that, in that exempted category. I'm pretty sure the Conservation Commission people would be in favor of this. I've worked with them right now on the tree protection bylaw stuff. I haven't specifically talked to them.
Yeah, it certainly will help if they.
Yeah, I will. I'll reach out to
Governor or one of the other.
Yeah, no, I definitely know Claire Rondelli. I know her, so I will do that this week probably. And also I should reach out to the Board of Health. I agree. And the reason I looked at their ability to enforce, they do have the ability to enforce. And there was a time I had to call them about something where people were sawing stone and creating, and apparently they were horrified. They're like, oh no, you're not allowed to do that without active water or something mitigation. So they do enforce this type of thing. It's similar, where somebody's creating an unhealthy plume of some kind of fumes or something. And then what could everybody do to help? This is the best question. Come to town meeting when it's being debated and just stand up and speak in favor of it, because my understanding, I'm a fairly new town meeting member myself, but my understanding is that residents can speak, but they can't vote. And so if residents come and just say, you can usually only speak once. I just want to speak in favor of this, say why or something. The town meeting members are listening, and I'm quite sure we will have landscape companies come and tell us how it's going to put them out of business. Somebody at Finance Committee asked if I had reached out to any, and I was like, why am I reaching out to them? They're just going to say, no, we don't want this. Of course they don't want this. It's change. it's something somebody else is asking them to do versus something they thought of. I'm just not sure that there's really a whole lot of value at this point in, you know, reaching out to landscaping companies that are going to oppose it anyway, so. Anyway, so that's my opinion, is if you can come or contact your town meeting members. We all have town meeting members, they all have emails. And although it can be difficult to find that
Yeah.
information, it is there.
Well, actually, to that point, and give Brinley a chance to speak as well, but she has put in the chat the particular place where you can go to see the list of all of the town meeting member email addresses. So you can contact just not your own, but all town meeting members if you
Yeah.
want. Brinley,
say
did
this-
you want to add to that or add other comments?
Oh, yes, thank you. I'd love to add to that. I actually put that in there because I wanted to say for this or any article that you wish to express opinions about. I know I get emails from people as a town meeting member, and I do actually take them into account. And I do think that emailing your town meeting members or all town meeting members is not a bad idea. If you scroll down on the link that I put in there, and it's easy to find if you don't do it from the chat. If you go to the town meeting website on our town website, and you scroll down and it says town meeting members, if you click on that, it gives you a link. Yep, just like that. And it gives you a link of everybody's addresses, and it's extremely easy to just copy them and paste them into an email. And I also think that maybe one of the things that would be a good idea is, I know we get information as town meeting members, and maybe having a one-page handout or, you know, a double-sided page handout that gives more information in advance so people can do their own homework. I think also really helps. I say that to both you and Rick, appreciative of what you're doing here with these. And I think that giving members more information than what's in the recommendation book from FinCom is often very helpful. And I do think that it's not a bad idea to show people that it's an easy thing in pricing. I just easily put into examples in backpack leaf blowing air blowers. One's gas, one's electric. So they're actually pretty similar in cost. So it's really not hard. We have one in our yard and we get an enormous amount of leaves, and we've used it with absolutely no problem, even when they're wet. We've had no problem with our non-stinky, non-loud, battery-powered leaf blower. Thank you.
Great information. MetroWorks, Cindy?
I have two ideas. One is, if as a residents of Natick can tell their people that come, you're not allowed to use a gas leaf blower on my property. So either you rake it, or you use a battery powered, or you just leave it and I'll deal with it. And the other thing is, she's 91, she still goes out with a rake. I mean, you could put a great photograph on a whole page of a great pile of leaves and children helping their family. I'm sure you can.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
I mean, I grew up where we got paid, 10 cents for this piece, and then it was like $1 for the whole lawn. And then we're like, Dad, inflation. So it went up to $2 for the whole lawn. And we did our own raking and our own mowing, and Dad only bought a power mower when he was about 80 because he was in the business, and the grass should grow taller than his push mower was too short.
Yeah.
And that was his reason. It wasn't an excuse.
Well, there's definitely communication. I mean, if it does pass and if it's going to succeed, there will need to be a communication, education, and outreach campaign. And that, to me, that's when we start working with the lawn care companies. Like, they're gonna fight it, frankly. And then if it's a reality, that's when it's like, okay, let's work together on this. So
even if it
that's
doesn't
really the
pass,
strategy.
we can still
Oh, absolutely.
townwide encourage people to talk to their people and say, I really don't want you bringing that gas thing.
That's true. I mean, Listen, there are certain people who will do that, and then I look at I use my neighborhood as the
Yeah.
bellwether, and, there's people who just, it's just like, they just aren't thinking, it's
Because they're not
absolutely.
there during the day.
Or even if they are,
Yeah.
they don't care. Frankly, they want their things to be the way they are. It's convenient, it's
Yeah.
what they want, and, so, but education outreach helps, I think. I think it's a positive change, and people feel happier when they don't have that stuff going on. Everybody feels impacted by the noise, everybody, so.
Well, thank you for that, Victoria and Brinley and Rick, not only for your presentations this morning, but for taking or doing all the work to bring these petition articles to the town.